states, from some of the hilly regions, some of the coastal areas, some of the agrarian areas, where their livelihoods and their lives have been impacted due to climate change. So in search of better opportunities, they move to cities like Delhi. So the biggest challenge for us is that no matter how much you plan and how much transport you build, it's never enough. We have 400 kilometers of metro that we've built over the last 7-8 years. But even that 400-kilometer metro is not enough. It's always overcrowded, because if we are getting 300,000 new people every year, the biggest challenge for us as the city-state government is to be able to cater to everybody that comes to Delhi. That's point number one. The second issue is that Delhi, when it was planned, it was not very well planned. So you have pockets where all the commercial activity is, and then you have pockets where most of the people live. So a lot of people travel 25 to 30 kilometers every day to their work of employment. It's almost impossible to retrofit that, because lives are already there and communities are there. You can't uproot them and replan the city. Also, Delhi has almost 23% tree and forest cover, which we don't want to cut down to build public transport. So how do we retrofit all of this and still build enough transport, make it affordable, make it safe, reliable, and accessible? That has been our biggest challenge. We are working through all of that. And I can speak when we come back, or you want me to continue now?
No, please, go ahead.
Sure. So we are following a three-pronged approach. A, we want to increase the public transport. B, we want to make public transport free for everybody. And C, we want to encourage the rich to leave their cars and move to public transport. So that's the three-pronged strategy. In terms of increasing the public transport, we have right now around 400 kilometers of metro line. We have placed an order for 10,000 electric buses in Delhi. So in the next 3 years, all of Delhi will only be powered with electric buses. I think when we have a delivery of the 10,000 buses, Delhi will probably have more electric buses than any other city in the world. In terms of making public transport cheap for everybody, I'm very happy to say that any woman in Delhi, all my sisters sitting here, anybody who comes to Delhi, the buses are free for everybody. For every woman of Delhi, the buses are free. And we made it free for everybody 3 years ago. And in the 3 years, 1 billion women have traveled. So we issue something called as pink tickets. Any woman who boards a bus gets a pink ticket, which is free. So 1 billion women have taken this ticket.
And you have ensured that they are safe to travel.
We've ensured they're safe to travel. So there is CCTV, there is GPS, we have bus marshals in every bus. What this has also done is that a lot of women who earlier could not travel to a little far-off place for employment have now started traveling. So this has also increased livelihood opportunities for women. And we've documented a lot of these case studies that how women who earlier were homebound because wherever they lived in that neighborhood, they did not have livelihood opportunities, are now able to travel by bus to say 10 kilometers away where the commercial activity is, and they're able to get employment. In terms of moving private car owners and private two-wheeler owners, what we are trying to do is we are trying to make electric vehicles, the cost of electric vehicles at par with ICE vehicles. So today in Delhi, if you have to buy a new electric vehicle, there is no tax on it, so there's no registration fee, there is no road tax. So as a result of this, a new electric two-wheeler costs the same as an ICE two-wheeler. And I'm very happy to say that in the past 2 years, all new electric two-wheelers, around 25% are now electric. So all the people who could not afford an electric two-wheeler are now moving from ICE two-wheelers to electric two-wheelers. We have a wonderful scrappage policy in place that we want to get rid of your old old polluting vehicle and buy an electric vehicle, then the government subsidizes that, government incentivizes that. Now the challenge is that how do we get the car owners to move? We've managed to move a lot of the two-wheeler owners to public transport. But the rich and the elite of Delhi are still not leaving their cars. So that is our challenge that we are hoping to work on in the next 5 years. We've recently launched a premier bus aggregator policy where we are allowing bus services to bring in luxury premium buses to Delhi, and people can buy a seat on the luxury buses. We are hoping this will motivate some of the richer people of Delhi to move towards public transport. I'll stop here and then I can come back.
Let's come back to that, because this is a really interesting question around how do we shift mindset and demand for those for whom it's not a constraint, but it's actually going to need to be a choice. I'd love to pick up on it's a really interesting pickup already on this question of affordability, accessibility, and the equity, economic access that comes with increased transport opportunities that you were talking about, Liza. Let's come to this question of multi-level governance, because you both mentioned it, and it's embedded in the challenges of cities, how to really get this kind of constant loop, feedback loop up and down. How do you see that happening? How is it happening in Argentina? Or what are some of the obstacles, some of the enablers for this?
Well, in particular in the city of Rosario, where I come from, our city is a medium-sized city of more than 1 million. So it's the third biggest city in Argentina. Our city is, in terms of governance, developed since last year. So we are celebrating 1 year and a half of continuous experience in terms of governance. Our governance is made of a cabinet, a local cabinet. So that's with representatives of all the areas of the local government, and at the same time a committee, an advisory committee with representatives of NGOs, of private sector, the different chambers, academy, the universities. So it has been an amazing experience so far. We had the opportunity because our plan, our local plan, the first iteration, was prepared in 2019. So even though it was a participatory approach to develop the plan, it was without the governance in place. So when we had the governance in place, we really had to revise, or we felt that it was very important to revise all the plan, and also to develop a monitoring system for all the, of course, all the city that is currently published on our website. So we revised all the plan, and we prioritized 62 measures with specific goals, both in adaptation and in mitigation, with the governance. I think that the governance at that level, because we are talking about multi-level, but I'm just referring now to the local level to then go quickly to the other levels. At the local level, the governance opportunity really allowed us to, first of all, to raise ambition, because every time, and we had a local stock take 1 month ago, and that was also very critical during the conversation. So people was very grateful with the institutions, the opportunity, the stability of all these institutions to have an opportunity to participate and to have everything in a very transparent way uploaded, so you can find all the measures, how they are progressing, which are the main goals. So that's a good part. Of course, the ambition is never enough, and we really need to raise it. But I think that at the local level, the governance really help us and challenge us to raise the ambition, to raise transparency and accountability, because we are also a city that has a tradition in terms of participatory approaches, but to have a body that is constantly there. So every month or every 2 months you come back and you have all these groups and you have specific conversations on how you are implementing everything. It's quite a challenge, but an amazing journey. And to add to that, in terms of on the different layers of this governance, let me say that for us, it was also, and it's also very critical to have, for example, in the committee, we have representatives from the province, so the subnational level, let's say, and the federal government. So this kind of approach was also very interesting because at the national level, we also have a cabinet and we also have an advisory committee by law. So these bodies can exchange. And the other layer I want to raise is the international cooperation. For us, the cooperation with the CLAY and other international organizations that really help us to build and capacities and to really display and showcase what we are doing in a better way. For example, to try to find more investments, to see where private sector at the local level, but also at the international level, can involve more. So yeah, I mean, I think that so far the governance has been an amazing opportunity, also challenge, of course, but a real good opportunity for the city.
So you're describing an experience which is a collective decision-making, but a collective learning process of constant kind of feedbacks, challenges, problem-solving. I'm going to come in 1 minute to this question of how do you get a richer field of voices in, but let me just quickly come to both of you. Lisa, what do you see as being the advantages of a multi-level governance approach in what you were describing, and also for the Delhi experience? Is this a part of the way in which these kinds of transport mobility transformations are being rolled out?
Do you want me to? Go ahead. Well, first of all, I need to say that it's been very inspiring because what I'm hearing here, it's a very optimistic way of saying things. And for example, Pilar, listening to you saying that it was a very amazing experience, it gives me a very inspired way on the way to move forward on these transformations. Also, I wanted to raise that there's a very effective tool that is the subnational urban mobility plans that have proved to be an effective tool to leverage local, national and international finance as they create a political environment to do those things. And also, I want to endorse what you said about the involvement of the citizens and the multi-stakeholder in the whole process of a building of a public policy or a specific project. So it's very important to have this approach of multi-sector participations of the citizens, but also those who are not just in charge, but are going to be affected of the project. So I think that is a very good approach to create a different way that also builds trust in the people. We also can see walking through pilot projects that makes people feel that the things are moving forward also and allow us to measure the implementations. So also about the data and the way that data needs to be open allows academia and social society to also follow that transparency and also include this critical vision to the projects. So I think that's a very, very, very important aspect to have in mind in these kinds of projects.
Reena, is this also true, this kind of very transparent engagement with Delhi citizens as well, or is it not? That's the next stage for you?
No, the engagement with Delhi citizens is very transparent, but Delhi is also a very complicated governance structure. You know, we have the federal government, we have the municipal government, and we have the state government. So there are 3 levels of government, and that sometimes is a bit of a challenge. That how do you negotiate 3 levels of government, and how do you bring everybody on the same table and with the same priorities? But we are trying to work through that challenge, and we're making good progress on that.
So maybe we'll come back to this also, particularly to pick up this notion of how this is a way of giving confidence to finance. Okay, now it's time to hear about the voices of those who inherit so much of what we are seeking to do here. Lucia, what is your perspective on how the voice and the active engagement of youth shapes and plays a role in these kinds of large-scale transformations of the urban environment?
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the invite and for letting me take part in this event. I would like to start remarking that children and young people are a highly vulnerable group to the impact of climate change. And this higher exposure maybe, I think, gives them newer and fresher ideas and also more original approaches to these issues. Because I think we feel with a higher sensibility the urgency of the situations and the urgency of a change. And this is, of course, reflected in our ideas, our activism, and our proposals when it comes to approaching goals like clean and decarbonized cities. But it is really important for governments and other authorities to actually not only impulse our ideas and actions, but to give us the skills we need to actually make sure we are taking into account that our participation is effective and that our opinions are not overlooked, because they are highly overlooked when it comes to decision making. And there are lots of examples that I could quote when it comes to youth participation that support this idea. There's one very representative one, the complaint by 6 children and young people against 33 states before the European Court of Human Rights. They argued that the approach they were taking towards the climate emergency was insufficient and inadequate, and they argued also that it was a direct violation of human rights. And this is true. And in terms of childhood, they're directly impacted by the climate crisis at various levels. It threatens lots of their fundamental rights: the right to health, to safeguard, to a healthy environment, to be heard and not overlooked and taken into account, and even their right to life. We could say the climate crisis is a children's rights crisis. Another very well-known example, the Fridays for Future movement. It has already mobilized thousands of young people around the world. So this is why I think youth-led initiatives are really playing a crucial role when it comes to approaching these issues or pursuing these goals. Because due to this new approach, it is really needed to put together different visions and representation of different generations on the tables. So the more variety of ideas, of approaches, of points of view, the more inclusive and effective the results will be.
Can I ask you a question around this really challenging shift in what people think is a right or an aspiration in life? So Reena was talking about one of the biggest challenges is how do we have wealthier people get out of a car and into the context of public electrified transport? What role do you think young people have to play here? I was in the New York Climate Week and we were talking about what's the most radical action you could really think of. And our table got extremely excited about the idea of lowering the voting age to 12 and putting 1.7 billion people immediately into decision rights. And then there was a big debate about, but then it does matter enormously whether they are also part of a sense of willing to act on their parents and their own sense of entitlement. What is your perspective on, is this part of the way we can help adults let go of this very car-centric way of living in cities, or an aspiration to become car-centric for many developing cities?
Well, of course. I mean, we, young people and children, also live in cities. So why not hear what we have to say? I think you will be surprised. You will be surprised. I know lots of young people around me. Me, myself, we have lots of ideas. And I think if we got more representation and you actually took our opinions and listened to us, and maybe even putting them, like, start including them, maybe you will be surprised in a good way with the results.
In the leadership coming through.
Yes.
So are there fora for young voices in the city of Rosario in Costa Rica, in Delhi? How is this coming through? How is there an intergenerational dialogue around the future of the city?
In our city in particular, we included one position of the committee is at least allocated for youth.
Mm-hmm.
So from the 3 seats from NGOs, one is for sure is for youth organizations. And in some cases, we had arrangements for 2. So it's also something that we make democratically with the NGOs. And we also, this year, we had 3 events in terms of local stocktake. The last one I already referred to, but the second one that was in June 5 in the context of Environmental Day, it was focused on youth. So that stocktake was we made the first experience in the Earth Day. And we like it so much that we decided to repeat the experience but with young people. And the experience was based on this kind of agora methodology, trying to have a very horizontal and very simple conversation between citizens and people, and their aspirations and their fears and also their needs about the future, but also what we are experiencing now, and trying to take all these multi-levels together too, because it's not only to talk about what is happening in your city, that we have, of course, big challenges, big economic, political challenges. This year in Argentina, we have elections in all levels, local, subnational, national levels. So that was also very challenging, and these also generate a lot of expectations, but at the same time some anxiety in young people. So trying to navigate that together, because it's very, I mean, it's not good, and it's not true to say, okay, you are anxious. No, we are all anxious in many ways. Yeah. So we really share all that, and to build solutions together. We have a very good conversation on climate justice and what means climate justice in our context, not in other contexts. What is to create new jobs in our context, where we have half of the people under poverty. So yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Lucia that we are well surprised by the ideas, the thoughts that we find from youth people in our city. So I'm completely sure that we need to continue improving those channels and to make them permanent. It's not just something that you can let it go or just for an opportunity.
And do you see, if we may ask, that these channels may help you navigate this next immediate political challenge of your latest election result?
I think they will help us.
I hope so.
I really
we are really all hoping so.
I know. I am on the same page. So I think they will help us. As I said many times, these Agora experiences didn't start with the measures. Yeah. We started with that, with the feelings. What do you feel? What do you believe about what we are experiencing? We have a very violent environment right now in our city. So it's very important to connect all that with climate action, because then you talk about climate action and people say, what are you saying? I mean, people is being killed on the streets. I have bigger problems. So if we don't connect with that, with people, it's like we are Martians. I mean, we are from other world. I mean, we really need to connect with what people is experiencing.
And this sounds very similar to what you were saying,
exactly.
Reena, so perhaps you can build on this.
Yeah. So we have something called as eco clubs in all the schools of Delhi. So there will be around 2,000 clubs in Delhi, where children and youth are pledging what actions they can take, and at the same time, we are hoping that they would hold elected governments accountable. that and also get their parents to ask questions before voting. That and I totally agree with my co-panelists that unless we make environment and climate change a political issue, things are not going to change. Unless we get people who are voting, who are on the ballot paper, to ask questions on environment and climate change, not much will move the needle, because like she said, we are always faced with issues of poverty, issues of employment, and then climate sort of takes a back seat. How do you make sure that climate does not take a back seat? Will only happen if young people and the parents of young people start asking questions. And this is what we are hoping to do through our eco clubs. Last year we ran a very successful campaign. It was called One Trip Less, where we said that if you're taking 10 trips in private vehicles in a week, can we pledge to reduce by 1? Like, let's this week take only 9. Either use public transport or not go out in your car one day. And it was a very successful campaign, all because of the young people. So young people are, and I feel, I'm actually sorry that our generation has not done enough. But I am really hoping that all the young people who are going to also start voting very soon are going to hold all of us accountable and make sure that we move faster and we move quicker on these promises. Yes.
And maybe we try moving faster in the meantime ourselves, so we feel we are meeting their expectations. Liza, what is your experience here? How does this work in Costa Rica, and what in the programming you are doing, the partnerships?
What we've seen in Costa Rica as a civil society, it's moving forward to allow young people to be in these kinds of spaces. Now our political situation has changed a lot, so that makes another different environment that we have some years ago. But I'm totally agree on that kind of disruptions that the status quo needs to really see the systemic transformations we need. Also, something that it's happened, for example, in transport, it's a traditional way of planning transport. It's like saying that we all move in the same way, and that's not true. Women move differently. People who needs to care for older or younger people moves totally different. Young people and children move different. So we need to move forward and pushing through this old way of planning transport and understand and visualize these other ways of moving the whole society to really put transport on the needs for the people. So that will change a lot the operation services, the infrastructure, for example, regarding to sexual harassment and violence with women, and another infrastructure that makes our city like safer, healthier, and decarbonize. Also wanted to say that regarding also based on this, data is very, very, very important. And the more information we have on specific topics such as equity and gender, the better decisions we can make for all the people. So we need to encourage authorities to collect data on passengers, freight transport, walking and cycling trips, informal transport or popular transport now, coverage and users, because that's the way we're gonna change the systems to a broader approach and inclusivity and equity way of seeing transport.
So this question around, first of all, one of the things I want to observe is when we are talking about decarbonized and clean cities, we're talking about a huge wealth of factors. So this is an inherently systemic approach to inherently systemic opportunities and challenges. So the information that is relevant is not simply emissions, it's information with respect to societal experience. And that's important, I think, in the way in which we are asking about data collection, interpretation, usage. Let me come then to skills. You touched on the importance of equipping people with the skills to be living differently, but also to be making different decisions. I can imagine one of the key challenges is, or I certainly know it, the experience from working in Europe in the City Mission, the skills gap is enormous, and educating people to be able to have these kinds of conversations and dialogues on what do we want, how could it work, what are the implications, what do you have to give up, but what do you have to learn how to become. How is skill development and how are each of you experiencing enhancing the pace of skill building, of mindset shifts, of education? The clubs in Delhi are clearly working really well at its primary and secondary schools.
And colleges.
And colleges. So it's sort of a secondary, tertiary, really young people. What's happening for adults? How are we helping this transition in terms of mindsets and skills professionally? Anyone want to start?
Yeah. One of the main ideas that we explored when we prioritized these measures that I referred before was to have like a triple approach. So with each measure, you have a governance associated. So you not only have the climate governance, but you also have specific governance arrangements, for example, related to biodiversity and trees, related to waste, etc. So that's the measure, the specific governance approach, and the third part of each measure is the awareness raising and education approach to that measure and the different campaigns associated to that. So this triple approach is helping us. I give an example. Measure number 1 was related to risk because in our plan, all the vulnerability and risk assessment was mostly based on floods, because that's the main threat that we had forever. But now the risks and the impacts are, of course, multiple. So we need to develop a multiple approach in terms of a map with this multiple approach in terms of climate risk. And we are in the last part, so we are finalizing, but we develop the map with having different participatory workshops in all the 6 districts of the city, making that the different members of the committee can participate by providing their own, for example, we have transport experts, we have experts on energy, and so they can go and participate in all these workshops. So we try to have this double approach. Is like you build and you implement, but at the same time you raise awareness. So when we go to the district, you have all kinds of scenarios. Some people say, what is climate change? What is a risk? What is decarbonization? What is net zero? So it's very difficult, very challenging, but very interesting, of course, because then you need coming back to the previous message. Is like you really, in order to have these people on board, we cannot go and talk about floods. We cannot talk about transportation in that district and mind shifts and everything if they are saying what is climate change. So anyways, we need to do all that. So our approach is trying that each measure can have these 2 other additional measures that help to strengthen and to build the measure in a better way. Yeah.
Well, I'm impressed. I think actually one of the things that I noticed that it implies is that, first of all, it's about building a literacy. My question is, how do you build a literacy that is treading the line between anxiety and hope? I know from my own conversations at home with my children, it's a very fine line between hope and despair, and anger, actually. But also, for Europeans, perhaps there's a particular challenge, but I'd be interested in India in terms of the aspirations for education in Costa Rica. It's as if we need to create a world, or it's not as if, we need to create a world in which what we call white-collar and blue-collar education and jobs are held by everybody, that each of us knows how to work on the skills of renewable energies at the same time as we may need to work on legal contracts and decision-making and governance and leadership, because we simply don't have enough skills for the work we have to do. How are you seeing this? For example, is there a discussion in the youth movement around how to close some of the skills gaps faster, where the education system is not necessarily equipping that well if you're going to be working in big city transformations?
Well, of course, I think when each one of us has spoken, all of us at some point said the same, and that's something I would like to highlight: the importance of information, of research, and of awareness raising. You cannot promote sustainable mobility or create more green urban spaces in cities if the people don't understand why. You cannot expect that to be maintained in time, or people to actually support those measures if you are not promoting information and awareness raising campaigns aimed at population. People need to understand why, so that they can care, and therefore they can support these approaches.
Yes, so that they can care, so that they can make it a question of political decision-making for justice and for hope.
Exactly.
Indeed. Any reflections you would add on this? And then we're going to come to finance.
I want to say again, building upon action, build trust, that we need to invest in scale matter, public, safe walking, cycling, and micromobility networks in neighborhoods. That's the way we get in closer to the people, and people could see the benefits of these kinds of interventions in their own neighborhoods, in a general matter in the city, but in the neighborhoods. Because, for example, and I will endorse what Pilar was saying, that this will arise also awareness across the system on the benefits of low carbon transport actions. Also, for example, in 2022, just over 3% of cities worldwide had a low emission zone. So we are starting to see the changes on the city and the neighborhoods of those kinds of interventions. So in that case, that evidence and people feeling those changes will encourage us also to start believing and change a bit our behavior on a more optimistic way to walk through this huge challenge that we have regarding to climate change.
I'll ask a question. Actually, I'm going to ask it specifically to you, Reena. How do you deal in Delhi with informal communities?
Informal?
Informal communities, with the city that is not necessarily...
On electric vehicles, on a new solar policy. So we have started skilling courses in our colleges and we hope to create 40,000 jobs in the EV sector. We've started courses on urban farming because that's another area that we are working on. So we are hoping that a lot of the youth will be employed in these green jobs in the next 5 years. Coming to informal sectors, that's a real challenge for us because some of these neighborhoods are very, very dense. So to be able for us to even provide basic services sometimes becomes a challenge. Yesterday I was speaking on a panel on water. How do you ensure water to all your citizens? Some of these neighborhoods we've not managed to install water pipelines because they're just so crowded. So we've recently launched another program called Water ATM, where these water purifying machines installed next to some of these informal settlements, and each household gets a card and they're entitled to 20 liters of clean drinking water, so they don't have to stand in line to get water. So we are trying to work out these arrangements to be able to cater to this population. But our hope, and this is a hope for the country, that we invest in rural areas in such a way that not a huge part of our population needs to migrate to cities. And that's where, I think climate finance comes in, that a lot of this population, if we were to look at historical responsibility, India is almost 60% agrarian. So 60% of our population depends on agriculture for their livelihood. These are farmers whose environment footprint historically would be minuscule, but this is a population that has been impacted the most. And this is the population that moves to the cities, because if they're living in coastal areas, or they're living in mountain areas, or they're living in rural areas, either their homes are being flooded, or there's a cyclone there, or their yield and productivity has gone down so much that agriculture is not an option anymore. So they move to cities in looking for livelihood. So how do we, and we've been talking about climate finance now for so many years, and I'm so disappointed that there has been very little action. There is very little money flowing into the global south on actual projects. What is happening is a lot of greenwashing, and there are so many reports which tell us that what is touted as climate finance is really not climate finance. And I think Reuters did a whole report on the kind of projects that are being funded under climate finance. And my favorite is a love story set in Argentina, which I think the Belgium government paid for, that it was under climate finance, you know. And I think, you know, the US gave a loan to Costa Rica for building a resort. Again, climate finance. So I'm hoping that the new loss and damage fund would fund some of these projects, some of real projects, fund cities like Delhi to buy electric buses. And that is real climate finance, not funding a love story. That is not climate finance. And
unless it does something remarkably transformative. So
it was set in the Argentinian rainforest.
Okay.
Maybe that was the reason why it was climate finance.
Well, maybe. So let us unpack this question of finance, and I'm interested in all these perspectives because it's often a highly technical issue, so it's not so easy in this question of creating awareness and understanding. And certainly as in the experience of an organization, say, implementing large-scale urban transformation, it's exactly the challenge of you can't just deal with a city without dealing with its surrounds and with the rural area, it's city and region. My question is around the most significant challenge and where you have seen examples of something like this being addressed. The trouble with finance is it's always looking for specific projects. Transforming whole cities, decarbonizing whole cities of climate finance, well, let's maybe not call it climate finance because that's actually one of the challenges. But where there are examples of investment in the transformation of the many elements, the many pieces of a puzzle that need to come together for a city to transform. Do you have good examples? Or can you try and turn it around into what would you ask if someone were to arrive tomorrow with a loss and damage fund? How would you channel finance into the many pieces of the puzzle?
Yeah, in our case in particular, probably the first thing to say is that in order to be clear in terms of transformative finance, you need to be also very clear in terms of your objectives. And that is obvious, but it's always important, even if obvious. So we had projects in the past that probably didn't really weren't so helpful. They were helpful, but they could have been more helpful in case they were really aligned with the priorities, not only the political priorities, but also the priorities of people in terms of transformation. Priorities help us to guide the seek for guidance for finance. So now we, every time we have an opportunity, for us is clearer because we know what we are looking for and the kind of investments that we need. We know that we cannot say, okay, we need both, of course. We need the small grants for the readiness, and they are very, very, very helpful. In many cases, for example, now we are having just one of those related to waste and on the readiness for a biodigestion plant that we have been developing the plans forever. I mean, at least 7-8 years, but we couldn't achieve it because we didn't have the investment. So now we feel that with this last readiness, with all the different plans in place, well, we can be in the position to really access these that will be transformational for us, in particular since waste is 25% of our emissions. But at the same time, for example, with electrification and electric mobility is something that we really seek for, but at the same time it's not so simple in Argentina because you have all the lobbies. We have lobbies everywhere, of course, but there is a clear agreement in terms of not moving so far to that place. So even when you try to buy, even when you try to access, you can't. So you really need all this, even international cooperation, not only because of money, but also in order to track together and to push together for that transition.
So it's not just the question of is money ready, but also what is money up against in these counteracting forces. What do you see in Delhi? How are you managing transition? I know I came across the Long-Term Investment Coalition with a real interest in sovereign wealth and institutional finance in electrification of cities at scale. Have you had successes in the way finance is coming to the table?
Not really. No. I think we will have to invest more in working with both national and subnational governments and really have a pipeline of projects ready. And a lot of this define our projects. As long as these projects have they're not polluting projects and they adhere to a basic principle, then they should be eligible for financing. But I think a lot of times what happens is that there is too much conditionality attached. And then we run into the problem of policy and procurement and all of that. So if this is more unconditional and it's left to the subnational government to define their priorities, that's how we can move faster. Otherwise, I'm very sorry, then we'll have the next COP and the next COP and we'll still be discussing the same issues.
And exactly the same problem of the gap between people with money who are waiting for projects that they expect to see and people who are trying to do the work. So you were referring, Liza, to this question of multi-level governance as a way of creating confidence for finance. Can you say just 1 minute around that?
Yes, I think that it's a way when everyone gets the award to multiply employment opportunities and decarbonize cities. It's walking, cycling, and public transport. And there is also an urgent action on repurposed funds currently going towards fossil fuel subsidies towards more sustainable and decarbonized transport cities. So now, for example, in this local partnership, we have just launched a call to action to double the share the energy efficient and fossil-free forms of transport for people and goods by 2030 by focusing on shift to public transport, walking, cycling, and rail freight, as well as electric vehicles and railways. So we think that we need to drastically scale up the consumptions of renewable energy and zero emissions energy sources towards fossil-free land transport. I think that's the way. There's a lot of money there, but we need to really, really make sure that we stop using subsidies on fossil fuels and move that money into more sustainable infrastructure for walking and safe cycling for all the people.
Well, we are here in Dubai at the critical moment of the COP on whether or not we can actually get an agreement on fossil phase out.
Yes.
You named this, Reena, as the critical element. Climate has to become political and it has to become a choice.
Indeed.
And a choice that then opens up this enablement of dialogue, of understanding, and really making different demand choices. Because it's not just a question of phasing out the subsidies, it's a question of demanding a lot more.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask you, Lucia, to finish with a reflection on what would you want demand aggregates in the world for what we want from energy, transport, materials, resources, food. So what would you want us to hear?
Well, I think my reflection would be that I would like everyone to understand that confronting climate change, climate issues in the urban sphere, where lots of people live, it's not just confronting the climate crisis, it's also promoting health, it's promoting security, it's all related. So it's not just about pollution, it's not just about clean up the decarbonized cities, it's about much more. and we have to make effective and real actions, and we have to make them fast. And there's a crucial need for the phase out of fossil fuels.
We have to have the courage to make these choices. Thank you very much. Thank you all for a fantastic session. Apologies for choosing to hear more voices and